as a church, as a individual church, as a multiplying church, and as the Church of Jesus Christ here in our country and around the world, there are foundational, fundamental truths that we must understand. First, what is a church? So it says, now in their church at Antioch. Well, what's a church? A church is not a place, it's a people. If you're part of the Bridge, you know this, that the word is ecclesia. Ecclesia is a called out, set apart people. I want to show you a graphic that I created. I call this the eternal circles. And here what you're going to see is reality. The world starts out in the black, lost, all of us. We were all there. The process of becoming a church, or a part of a church, is you become a Christian. Well, you start out in the dark, lost. You get drawn in by something to start looking, and now you're in a little bit of the light. And then there tends to be a part of the church that draws you in. Maybe you're focused on the learning. Maybe you just love the culture side of the loving that's happening. Or maybe you're just in the midst of a battle and somebody sent you some help, and so you get close enough to start liking what you're looking at. But you notice it's at the core that says live. It could say love, but love is not enough. You got to live the love. Once you become that person, you've been captured by grace. Now you're a Christian. God has done a miraculous work on you. You see, the church is only made up of Christians. Well, there are people that go to a church. There are people that look like they're part of the church. But you can't be a real church until the real Christ has changed you. Now, we open up our doors to everybody and always will, because our prayer is that through the witnessing and the sharing of truth and love, that God will do the miraculous work of capturing somebody's heart and drawing them to himself. So it's not that you've got exclusivity to where you close the doors. It's just the exclusivity of truth. And forgive me here if these words don't make sense, but there's a couple that I have to use. Saved and sanctified. Friends, you don't become a Christian until you've been saved out of your sin by the miraculous grace of Jesus the Christ, received by your faith. It's a miracle. Now, I say that because every saved person is going to go on a journey of sanctification. That's where God refines us. Okay, so at that point, a Christian, another way of calling a Christian is a disciple, a true disciple, begins to become sanctified, refined. God's doing a work on us. On the image that I shared with you, that's being in the center and being centered, or being brought closer and closer to Christ's likeness. Well, that's what's needed just to begin with the definition of a church. Now, once a church is gathered, you've got this collection of disciples. Discipleship will begin. And I want to share with you a definition of discipleship. And so I ask you to go ahead and take a look at this image. And read with me. Discipleship, it's a verb, by the way. It's the intentional endeavors of miraculous, Christ-like works in progress. That's my definition of a disciple. A miraculous, Christ-like work in progress that is engaged in finding the lost and growing the found, which is committed to making more disciples who will make more disciples who will make more disciples. This is what life as the church looks like. And it's all by God's grace, and it's all for his glory. This is the process. So when we see that there's a church now in Antioch, God's been busy. God's been building a people that are now living out this love affair, this discipleship, this growing, not only personally but collectively, right? Well, let me show you one more image that puts this in context, because somebody says, well, that sounds great, but how does it work? In every church, there are three things that are really centered on this Christ-likeness. There needs to be the content of truth, a culture of love, and it has to come through the conflict and the challenge of warfare, spiritual warfare. So if you're missing one of these pieces, and if you would, Matthew, hold that image up there for a minute. If you're missing the content of truth, or if you're missing the content of culture, or if you're missing the content of true refining fire and challenge, you're going to end up with something less than a true disciple. If you have plenty of truth and you have plenty of love, but you've not yet been tested by conflict, then you are a seedling. You are one who might prove to be a true disciple, but time has not tested yet. We don't know. And you need to look at the parable of the soils to see this. The parable of the soils say that not everybody that seems to sprout is real and living. Now, if somebody has instead plenty of love, they have the right culture, and they've been tested by fire, but they don't have the truth, well, now what you have is a heresy. You have somebody that maybe has been tested and is living out a demonstrated affection, but there's no truth. They're sincere, but they're wrong. Show somebody who has the truth and the time testing of a battle, but has no love, and you have a Pharisee. You have somebody who knows enough, but they're just a living hammer. But when you get the content of God's truth in the culture of God's love, tested and refined through the reality of conflict and spiritual warfare, and have rightly listened to and loved and followed the Lord, herein you see the biblical disciple. And I say to you, friends, when we read that, and there was a church in Antioch, it's a huge, huge statement. That means that what we have now in Antioch is the movement of God amongst his people, where there are genuine disciples, those who are following Christ no matter what. This, my friends, is who we have been called and created to be. And if we forget this, that it takes the saving grace of God, it takes the sacrifice of ourselves to be sanctified by the Spirit of God, we could be busy and religious, but we won't be a biblical church.